Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. We're going to do the Catalyst Astrology Report, the weekly report, but we are really going to focus today on our solstice point that is happening on Sunday, the 20th of June, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States. Let's exit out of studio mode here. Hello. And, we're going to talk about the weekend's astrology. We're going to look at the reading for the solstice and then talk a little bit about the astrology really leading up to the full moon on the 24th, which is a full moon in Capricorn. And so the difference between this year's solstice point, summer in the northern hemisphere, winter solstice in the southern hemisphere, is that it's not an eclipse this time. Last year we had a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse on the solstice point that's path of totality, and I covered this a lot last year, of course. It was kind of inevitable. It was unavoidable to talk about. Their last year's solstice point, summer or June solstice, the path of totality for that eclipse went right through China. It went right through Wuhan, it went through Hong Kong, it went through Taiwan. And so not only does the solstice represent a pinnacle moment where we acknowledge all of the energy that has led to this point, this apex point, and then the season changes, and we are now acknowledging that the next period is coming into effect. But with the eclipse, it was an energy that lasted throughout, I would say, the entire year. To have the eclipse on a solstice point like that, not only was it so powerful that I think it really reverberated up until this point. And the 0 degrees Cancer is a point of no return. Now we're entering the second act of our astrological year. The first act started with the vernal equinox in March, and now we're entering Act 2 with the solstice point. So I want to take a moment to thank and welcome back my subscribers, my supporters, my regular viewers. You truly are the lifeblood of this channel, and I cannot express how much I appreciate your support and for all of us being together. And if you're new here, welcome. It's great to have you. And whenever you interact with this content through sharing, liking, commenting, even subscribing, either on YouTube or BitChute, or Subscribestar as well. You can find that link in the description box below. Whenever you interact with the content, it actually does support independent content creators like myself who are completely organic in their growth. So let's get right into it, shall we? There's going to be a reading that I'm going to share with you. I usually don't do an intuitive reading on Fridays. We just do the weekly astrology. But considering that we have a solstice here on Sunday, I thought it was appropriate. And boy, oh boy, it certainly does seem to reflect the energy that is happening. So I'm just curious how people are feeling right now. I'll tell you what, I am very subdued. And this seems to be a lot of the energy that is going to encompass not only the solstice point, but as then we move into the second act of stabilization, right? There's a stillness that goes along with stabilizing. The nadir, the bottom of the chart, there is a receptivity. There's an emptiness in some ways. Isn't that Taoist expression, a bowl is most useful when it's empty? And that certainly is the case if you use singing bowls or Tibetan bowls. You can't get a reverberation out of it if it's full of things. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is the emptiness is providing the space in which to create. And yesterday we talked about the fool and the beginner's mind and allowing our own consciousness to empty itself out in order to be fully present and connected to our own instincts and our intuition, so that we can actually manifest our highest potential. So we're going to look at the astrology for today and, of course, tomorrow, and obviously the solstice point on Sunday, and just kind of briefly touch on the major transits that are going to be unfolding as we lead up to the full moon on the 24th, which is Thursday. Like I said, a full moon in Capricorn and Cancer. So let's just get right into it. We'll look at the chart. But the subdued, I don't know if anybody else is feeling it, like a really strong, just a calming of the energy. Hold on one second here. It's just so much glare. Thank you for being patient with this process. and we're gonna look at our chart for today. But the real benchmark, the barometer for energetics for me, besides my own experience of it, is you can just look at the animals, right? They're a pretty good indicator of what's going on. And usually in the morning, my animals are tearing around the house, getting into everything, fighting and playing with each other, my cats. But today they are in total nap mode. Hardly any activity this morning. Both of them just really mellow, sleeping in their beds and in various places. So I can tell that there is some sort of, overarching kind of, I don't want to even call it like an oppressive force, because it's not about that. It's just really pulling us down so much into this core of who we are as we prepare for this solstice point, because there's just been so much cerebral activity, of course, with all of the Gemini energy and Mercury retrograde, and Mercury is going to station direct during this week, right? During this week after the solstice, before the full moon, Mercury is going to station direct. So it's starting to also slow down. And we're going to see this reflected in the reading, that all of this really, really incredible air energy, the realm of the mind, even with Mercury in its retrograde, it's still active. It's still processing information, right? It's still engaged on a nervous system level, even if it's in a retrograde motion. And as we get closer to the solstice, it's going to start, and Mercury moving direct, it's going to start coming to a stasis point, right? Mercury will come to a standstill in its stationing before it then starts to move in its direct motion. So be prepared for that as well, that things will really come to a standstill in some ways to prepare for this moment. And we do want this, right? This is something worth embracing to a certain extent, because once we hit 0 degrees Cancer, we do this every year, right? There's always the moment when the sun comes into Cancer. This is a point of no return. This is the stabilization, right? This is when we plant the roots, stabilize us to the world around us, and this is where we're going to stay, right? And we will grow where we are planted, where we are stabilized. And this is something to embrace, because there's only so far that the mind can take us through our own journey around the zodiac, right? It's only this third house energy, and Gemini is only a temporary placement as we move through this process of individuation that the astrological chart represents, our soul's evolution. So we're looking at today, the 18th. Our moon's in Libra now, right? We are now feeling and personally engaged with our emotional landscape in terms of finding that fulcrum, right? That balance point that Libra really does represent. And Libra as a cardinal sign, cardinal air, is the application of our knowledge in order to initiate this balancing process, right? The scales of justice. So we are talking, it's about the form of our cooperation and the applying of what we've learned about ourselves to this relationship, whatever it is. And so we may be feeling a little bit more accommodating today with the moon in Libra. We may feel even, I hesitate to use these terms sometimes that seem like there's something negative about having a moon in Libra, but it's, kind of being willing to change in our form, right? To move and transfigure. Really, transfiguration is a big part of the first half of Libra, right? To change our form, to change our figure, to be willing to move things around so that those scales will be balanced. So a lot of times, especially with the moon, because it is so transient and fleeting, right? The moon is so fleeting in its motion, right? It gives us access to the full range of our archetypal emotional connection every single month. And so these are not new, but this moment here with the moon in Libra, especially leading up to the solstice, because the moon will in fact be in Scorpio at the time of the solstice. This is not lost on me, and we'll see it very strongly reflected in the intuitive reading. So what is happening today? Well, we see that the moon right now has just moved into has just moved into Libra, moved into the second degree. So it's already come into this quincunx with Jupiter, okay, which is soon to go retrograde as well, right on the day of the solstice. In fact, tomorrow it's going to really start its retrograde, and that's something to consider. It's going to start stationing, slowing down, and then on the day of the solstice is actually going to start stationing in its retrograde, right? Starting in the motion where it appears to be moving backwards. So in this moment here, before this happens, while Jupiter is still technically in its forward motion in Pisces, in its co-rulership, by the way, very powerful in Pisces, Jupiter is at its rulership as Sagittarius, but at one point it was also the co-ruler of, it was ruling Pisces as well before Neptune. So we have the two rulers of Pisces in Pisces right now. So this is not to be understated at all, how powerful this realm of the collective unconscious, the ocean of consciousness, the realm from which we are inspired or terrified, right? It is everything and that ever has been and ever will be, because it's about the Akashic records and the resonance and signature of everything exists in this space, right? It's also the fact that we are in fact one and the same, and this is the collective connection, the collective energy, the Pisces realm. Whereas Aquarius is the power of our collective energy, right? It allows for the power to move through us, whereas Pisces is in itself the collective energy or the collective field. And remember that water conducts electricity, and Aquarius definitely has this lightning bolt energy quality that moves through it. In fact, if we look at ancient mythology and the symbolism around the thunderbolt of Zeus, for instance, it's carried by Aquila, the eagle. And where is that? That is in Aquarius. That constellation is Aquarius, is in Aquarius. So that's something to keep in mind as well, that the Aquarian energy is about the ability to carry the energy, to hold the energy, and water in itself is an incredible conductor of electricity. So it's a little bit of a tangent there, but we are talking about the power of Pisces right now. Of course, Jupiter is going to retrograde and go back into Aquarius during its retrograde. So it will be moving out of its position of relative power into the area of its lightning bolt in some ways. So that's something we'll talk about down the line. But today we're talking about just this leading up to this solstice. So the quincunx, right? That opportunity for adjustment that it represents. Let's see here. You know, Libra is very, there's a lot of positive kind of, all the possibilities, right, of Libra, of the form of balance, right? Look at all the possibilities of new beginnings and new foundations, because we are now moving into a territory where it's not just about the individual's development, but is the first real connection with other and applying everything that we've learned about ourselves in this relationship. So at the beginning of Libra, specifically, there's a lot of, there seems to be a lot of potential and positivity, and the idea that it's all in front of us, right? All of the new possibilities and beginnings are all in front of us. So the quincunx here, as the moon is in its very early degrees of Libra, especially that third degree, the synthesis and harmony of the contrasts in every sign comes together at that third degree. So the dawn of a new day reveals everything changed, right? And as we came out of that Virgo time, I think that that's something that we can each personally connect to, that something has in fact shifted, and we are in the midst of our own transfiguration right now in order to balance ourselves with the rest of the world and what we are experiencing. The quincunx with Jupiter, this opportunity to adjust ourselves because these two aspects don't fit together, is that in Pisces, everything is already there. There's no getting away from or bypassing the karma of everything that has accumulated at the end of a cycle. And Jupiter has been really expanding this to the point where it's so big and so vast that it's almost unavoidable. And depending on how we interact with Jupiter, and where, how it's placed in our chart, and the other aspects that are related to our own personal evolution detailed in the astrological chart. This has either been a blessing or a curse, right? Because Jupiter is the defender of the collective value system and the defender of heaven, right? And is not necessarily here to accept and value all of it. It's the value of a cultural standard that Sagittarius represents through the synthesis of all of our knowledge and the understanding of our collective power of alchemy, right? This is what creates the physical material matrix is the alchemical power. Anyway, so as much as the dawn of a new day reveals everything has changed, we're feeling that within us. We really do have to adjust ourselves to the reality that Jupiter is expanding upon, which is that as much as we feel this on the inside, there's still no escaping everything that has accumulated. And in fact, there is a signature of everything that has come before that presents itself in some way. The Sabian symbol, as I talked about a lot of times now, is a petrified forest. And it's the idea that even in fragments, there is still something left from previous cultures and civilizations. And so if you take that from an archetypal and symbolic reference, everything that is accumulated, there's some measure of evidence of what has come before, even if it's not in its fullness. And so right in this moment, we're going to have to start adjusting ourselves. And this is a great opportunity to do it if we haven't started this process already. Now, when the moon comes into a sextile with our Mars in Leo, I mean, this has been, really, I think, Mars and Leo for all of the benefits of giving us a lot of confidence to act on our own nature, right? To put things into action. Mars is about action. It's a warrior. It's a superhero, action hero. It's the divine masculine. For as much as it being in Leo, I mean, this, as it continues to move through Leo, it's going to really start to build up that energy of passion, creative self-expression. And so Mars wants to act on it. So this particular moment here at the 5th degree of Leo is really meant to kind of broaden our consciousness to larger planetary cycles, which is going to be a little bit difficult for Mars because Mars is constantly acting, wanting to act. And so taking into account how much this particular degree of Leo is meant to have us be in awe of these large cycles that are way bigger than just our own individual selfhood on our own lifetime. It is something much bigger and goes over multiple cycles of planetary evolution. And it's the Sabian symbol is this, these formations in a deep canyon, right? It has taken how long to create these structures or these natural structures to form and to shape them. It's something way bigger than just what we can do. And so Mars, it would behoove us, I think, in this moment to at least be like, take it all in and realize that this is so much bigger, and acting on that or not acting on that, but acknowledging it, I think, is a really powerful perspective to have today. And the moon at 5 degrees Libra, this is the revealing of the foundation of an inner knowledge, upon which a new world. See, so much of Libra is about a new world, building a new world, because you are, again, applying your own individual progression to a relationship of some kind. And this is where we really develop something new. And it doesn't have to be a literal relationship with another person, although that's the easiest way to recognize it. But this could be a relationship with anything, with our own selves, with a particular aspect that we want to commit to, because it's really about commitment in that 7th house in Libra. And it's about the form of it, right? The form of it, which requires a material connection, right? This is why Venus rules Libra. There's a material element that's separable from Libra. As much as it is air, we are applying that intelligence to a very physical nature. And so again, Mars in Leo is saying even our expression, even our passion can be seen from a much larger planetary cycle, from something just bigger than ourselves, and then the moon in a sextile, right? These harmonious connections that activate and each other if we invest this energy. It's the necessity of us as youthful spirits, right, to learn from a teacher who has had a lot of experience, right, and has reached solid truths, illuminating truths through experience, right? This is about transmission of knowledge rather than learning something from a book. And we can apply this to where Mars is and kind of temper that that action that keeps wanting to go and go and go, with this idea that really it's about the beingness and the transmission on an emotional level, on an intuitive level, being revealed to us through the acknowledgement of much bigger cycles. When we can see things from a much larger perspective, from the moon, right? You know, you widen your perspective so much from the moon or from a different point in time. You can really receive the transmission that it is so much, there's so much more than meets the eye, if that makes sense. And all we have to do is look at the planet herself and the evidence of her own cycles to see how wide and how vast these cycles are. And that helps get us out of this really like blinder space, okay? So this is also part of today's astrological energy. So I also want to point out, and we're going to go into this a little bit because this is going to come back around. So the moon's going to come around today and be in a trine, as you can see, with the moon's north node. So she's going to trine her own north node. She's going to sextile her own south node. And I thought maybe it would be worth it to go back and revisit where the nodes are in terms of the fixed star energy, because they are in fact still in conjunction with Aldebaran and Antares, north node and south node respectively. And as the moon comes around and makes these connections to her own nodal axis at these positions, I thought maybe it'd be important to just kind of go back over what all of this means. So you can see here that we are coming very close to an opposition to Chiron. That's going to be exact late tonight into tomorrow morning. As you can see, this is at 10:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So by the time the moon comes into its opposition to Chiron, we will have technically crossed into the 19th, at least on the East Coast. So on the West Coast, it'll still be tonight, right, that this opposition will happen. And we'll talk about it because we're going to go through the whole weekend. But I want to bring out first, let's revisit Aldebaran first and Antares. So Aldebaran is the eye of the bull. Right here is Taurus the bull. Aldebaran is the eye. So it is one of the fixed royal stars. It is Aldebaran is one of the fixed royal stars. It is related to Archangel Michael, right? The watcher of the east, the protector of heaven. And you know, it's no accident that it's the eye of the bull, and they've made these connections here. So we are talking about in Gemini still, in terms of a zodiacal connection, and then in the constellation of Taurus. Those are different. They're different, right? The constellations are different than the zodiacal degrees, but it's in the degree of Gemini, in the eye of the bull. So Archangel Michael often is the protector of heaven, the watcher of the east, right? He is the warrior and the protector of all that is, all that is good and that is pure. And a lot of times and for me too, I feel like is very much the protector of the children. So what I think is interesting about this connection, number one, there's a starseed connection here I want to make too that is fairly common in my readings with certain types of starseeds. Number one, though, is that this fixed star rules a location that is 3 inches above the line of the breast, right? And what is that 3 inches? Well, that's where the thymus is, right? The thymus is a gland that produces the T cells for our immune system, right? So this gland is a huge part of our immune system, and it's most functional before puberty. So as a child, the thymus is doing its most activity to create the T cells that, support our immune function. So Aldebaran rules this place, and the thymus is technically right between that heart chakra and the throat chakra. And I believe, and I know other people have talked about this too, but I really feel it as well, that there's another chakra here that is going to come online and does come online. And my guess is that it actually is online as soon as we're born. And the thymus naturally starts to kind of shrink after puberty, right? It's not pumping out as much in terms of the endocrine system after puberty. And by the time of old age, right, when you get very elderly, it really is nothing more than a fatty mass for the most part. So the thymus, though, is the most active as a child, and it's the most active in creating the T cells for our immune system. So I feel like that the thymus actually is a chakra point that's very open and has an aquamarine color to it and is very active during childhood, and then just by a very nature gets shut down. But I'm wondering now if that's something that can be mitigated through energy work and children being attuned to energy work and Reiki and things like that. Does the thymus is it always meant to do that? So these are the questions that I'm asking. But what I'm pointing out here is the moon coming along and in this trine to her own north node, into her in connection to her own nodal axis. Now, what's the degree that it's doing this at? Well, 11 degrees Libra it's like a professor that's peering over his glasses at his students. So you have a professor that has accumulated so much collective knowledge as a result of becoming a professor, right? Holding the wisdom and the knowledge. And there's a problem with the acquisition of that knowledge, right? Because it puts so much strain on the body. It puts so much strain on the eyes, right? That when the professor is then transmitting, right, instructing, there has to be there's a disconnect in some ways with the organs that allowed for the accumulation of knowledge in the first place. So you can see that there is this in fact this connection here of the accumulation of the knowledge, and then having to meet the students where they're at, which requires that we look past all of the instruments that have allowed us and have a direct connection to the next generation, whatever it is. And so it really represents the problems that attending to the transmission of this knowledge, and the problems, the problems that we have gained as a result of the acquisition of it, and then teaching it is a totally different story. So we are talking about instruction, but we also are talking about the watcher, right? The eye of the bull, the thymus, the gland that produces the T cells that have our, allow our immune system to function properly. And when the moon makes this connection in a trine, right? That trine, 120-degree angle, right? It's not, it's very structurally sound and supportive, right? It's in itself very stabilizing, but we don't have to do much to get anything out of it. They're just going to make these connections in this air trine specifically. I think that in this moment, we are going to interact with, on some level, in personally and emotionally, with this process of transmission. And it's on the way to the thyroid, from the heart to the thyroid, from the heart to the throat chakra. We have this aspect in the middle, the thymus, that's represented by Archangel Michael. And so, how are we going to bridge this gap? I think this is something that is naturally going to come to us. It may stimulate in some ways the problems of, it's one thing to accumulate, right? The thymus, it's another for it to express itself, like the immune system actually functioning. So, this has a lot to do with where these things are at in your chart, but what I will say is that this is a really incredible moment to connect to the intermediary between the heart chakra and the throat chakra, which is the thymus, and which is the gland that supports our immune system and is in fact the watcher of the east. If we think about Archangel Michael as this protector, I mean, we are in fact engaging with not only where we're going, right, the North Node, which is the pioneering, we're the pioneers of the new Earth, right, moving towards new territory, but we do have to attend to the very real and very important transmission of knowledge from everything that we've accumulated. And it comes from, there's something about our immune system that is very much, and obviously that makes total sense because of everything that has been happening over the last year. So that's something to keep in mind. And then, of course, the South Node, as we know, is at the heart of the Scorpion, Antares. This is the collective paradigm that we are releasing and leaving behind. And the moon is in a sextile. Again, we would have to engage these energies of where the moon is at 11 degrees Libra with the South Node. In fact, that we would have to invest these energies with each other in order to get the harmonious benefit that they have with each other. So let's just talk about Antares real quick. The heart of the Scorpion, the Scorpio energy and the moon and everything that is associated with this sacral chakra area is going to come right out to the forefront with this solstice point, because not only is it that 0 degrees Cancer, right? So we are talking about feminine energy. We're talking about the water sign. We're also talking, the moon's going to be in Scorpio. Okay. So this is all going to come up. And so addressing these things now as the moon is making a connection to her own nodal axis is kind of giving us an insight into what we're going to do with this energy potentially. So Antares is related to Archangel Uriel, right? She or he or they are the fire of God, right? They held the secret knowledge of the disaster, right? The flood, and only shared with those that are worthy of holding it and can still believe in divine goodness. That's the thing. When you share the information about the disaster, the flood, however you identify it, right? The consumption of the planet by water, and the fire of God, right? Because you need both of these things to create, is the fire and the water. You still have to, there is a judgment there of only certain people that are able to hold this knowledge without, just like the sting of the scorpion. Are you able to hold the resonance of the sting and the pain of the depth of the human potential and the cooperation that is really exemplified by Scorpio in the 8th house? Can you hold it? Only certain people that can hold that and still maintain their resonance and their connection to divinity are worthy of getting this knowledge. And so this is in the seat of our sacral chakra, and Antares is the rival to Mars, because Mars and Pluto both ruled Scorpio at one point. And so it's just as powerful, but it's way more transformative. Whereas Mars is action-oriented warrior, this sting from the Scorpion is something more than that. It is much more reminiscent of Pluto, because this is how we transform. And if we cannot hold the sting of truth, right? Getting into the depth of the feeling, right? At the very depth of our own shadow. If we can't hold that and still maintain our connection to God or divine source, then this is where it's our undoing, right? And a lot of times this is what happens in the 8th house, is that when you can't hold the resonance of seeing your own shadow, of having your own that shadow mirrored back to you, and what that means, this is where the ego death is is too much, right? And this is where psychological problems really start to develop here if they haven't already. So I'm just bringing attention to here is that the moon is in a sextile to her own south node at Antares as well, at the same degree of Libra. So the thing about Libra is that this degree of Libra, 11 degrees of Libra, is actually, let's go back here, 10 to 11 degrees of Libra is in a square to the Lyran starseed markings, okay? And I see this a lot in starseed charts with Lyran starseeds, is that they have prominent positions that are here at 11 degrees Libra that are in square to their Lyran nature, because the Lyran nature is fearless. They go for it, right? Goal oriented. They pursue their dreams and their goals fearlessly, fierce independence, and really enjoy and value the material experience, right? The experience of being a material form, because Lyran starseeds are very ancient. They're just about as old as this galaxy, the Lyrans. And so these Lyran starseeds have been around, you know, they've incarnated as starseeds in other star systems as well. This particular degree, it's in square to this Lyran nature because the Lyrans aren't really wrapped up in the problems of transmission. That seems to be a much more Arcturian thing, right? But we haven't gotten to Arcturus yet. This is still in the earlier stages of Libra. This position really, I see it over and over because it is the sticking point for how to transmit this information to those who look to you as a leader, right? Because the Lyran starseeds are natural leaders because they're so comfortable and they're so adept at being in 3D that they just naturally step into leadership positions. It's very Capricorn, right? So this position as well is a real sticking point for Lyran starseeds. And so keep that in mind if you are a Lyran starseed, especially if you have this in your chart somewhere, 11 Libra in your chart, you're going to have a direct, personalized connection to these types of dynamics today, and realize that it's the midpoint between the heart and the throat chakra, that thymus, right? The gland that creates the cells that protect, our immune system is what protects us. So the struggle is transmitting it. And we're all going to kind of feel that, to a certain extent, feel that stress or that struggle. But the Lyran starseeds, especially if you have this in your chart, it's going to be really, really strong. And the sextile, right? And you can see here, we're also looking at there's a lot of trines in this chart too. You have this loose air trine with Mercury retrograde, a Libra moon, and then Saturn in Aquarius as well. There's a lot of grand trines in this chart, and they're water and air. So we already see this, plus this opposition to Chiron, and we'll get into that in a second. So just keep in mind that today that it's really about allowing ourselves. This is why it's so important to embody this beginner's mind and this full perspective, because as we get closer to the solstice and we move into the Cancer time and have a full moon with a Cancer Capricorn, we're going to have to be more willing to receive, to stabilize ourselves, and to accept where we are and be committed to it. And this can be really this moment where the moon makes a connection to her own nodal axis is going to be a moment where we get to recognize where we're going, where we're coming from, and how do we reconcile that with our own emotional position of trying to, how do we transmit this knowledge? It's one thing to hold it within us. It's a totally other thing to transmit it. And I would say that Saturn retrograde now has moved back into the 12th to a 13th degree of Aquarius, is a big indicator of how this is going to go down. Plus, where Mercury retrograde is, about the mental metamorphosis. It's a mental maturity that is reflected here with Mercury retrograde. And Saturn in Aquarius is now moved into a degree where we are now going back over what it means to have an inner barometer, right? Or do we have the technology and the instrumentation within us, very palpably, right? It's Saturn is in fact the material world. And so we can even look to the material world, to the matrix itself, the institutions, and the structures themselves are going to, in some ways, allow us to tap into this ability to to be able to anticipate what's coming. Right? And the issue is, how do we, and it's really about our immune system, right? It's about the thymus and not letting it totally shut down just because we're not children anymore. And Archangel Michael really does protect and stand for the children and the child in all of us, right? And that's when our immune system is really the strongest. So a lot of different ideas to keep into consideration here, but that Lyran aspect that's in square to the Libra moon today, when she's making this connection, I think is really going to come to the surface. And it's going to be connected as well to, in some ways, to the full moon. So this is today. We're going to move on to the 19th here. This is Juneteenth. This is Saturday. Of course, we already had our opposition to Chiron. Let's just go back and have it exact, so we know what we're talking about here. And let's see, the 19th. And as Mercury, the sun is moving closer to the end of Gemini, of course. All right. And so at the same time that it's in opposition to Chiron, the trine to Saturn is exact. And this is really nice because this is about, it's just about a young mind dreaming of perfect fulfillment, right? Again, we have to be willing to enter, and this is, again, the Fool, right? We have to be willing to, I can't wait to show you the reading for the solstice. We have to really be willing to engage our inspiration, this childlike nature, this, young minds dreaming of perfect fulfillment. We have to allow ourselves to get into this space that's not necessarily so serious, but open to new, and open and being open through inspiration, through fantasy. That's a very 12th house energy. And so as it's in its opposition to Chiron, of course, and at the same time in this trine with Saturn, exact. I mean, again, it's really about reconnecting to that part of ourselves, that innocent part of ourselves, that part of ourselves that is able to fantasize about perfect fulfillment, the part of ourselves that hasn't been, our thymus hasn't shriveled up yet. And so we have all of the means to protect ourselves from the outside while still maintaining our innocence. And this opposition here with Chiron it's really going to help us get out of that frustration with things not happening fast enough. And also too, because it's Chiron, it's constantly triggering all this wounding and victimhood of like, I got to do something. Why isn't this happening yet? I want this to happen because I know it's coming. Nothing can stop what's coming. We already know the outcome, but we want it to happen now. And that's part of being adolescent. The other aspect of being a child is to be open to all of the possibilities, to be innocent, to be playful, to be completely connected to your instinct and your gut, and rather than and being protected rather than allowing that part of ourselves to shrivel up. And then we try, we have a harder time moving from the heart chakra to the transmission of the thyroid. We've talked about this a lot. So this moon here is really going to be pulling on where Chiron is, but I think is a really beautiful moment. This is late tonight. It's also, like I said, in a trine to Saturn retrograde. Now at this position about being a barometer, of holding, being able to anticipate what's coming because of the instrumentation. It's very basic, right? A barometer measures air pressure. When the pressure of the air changes, we have changes in weather. And this is how you're able to predict weather, is using these types of tools. Well, the entire culture that's represented and the structures of the matrix represented by Saturn, right? The authority and the government and these institutions that represent the physical boundary of reality. All of these things are, as Saturn is in its retrograde, we're paying a lot of attention to it now. And again, this connection between this air trine between the moon and Saturn while in a opposition to Chiron is really letting us be, if we can tap into the idea that we have everything within us in order to anticipate what's coming, it kind of allows us to release that anticipation and just be childlike, to engage our fantasy, to engage a dreamy quality, to blow bubbles, so to speak. And I know that's hard for people right now, and I'm not suggesting that we should not be doing anything, but this Chiron in Aries is really working against us in terms of, we want things to happen and we want them to happen now. And in fact, we may even bring about a negative expression of this if we don't pull it together, essentially. So, and like I said, here's the trine here to Saturn. It's going to quincunx right after that, come into a quincunx with Uranus. That's always fun whenever you have to have an adjustment with where Uranus is, and at the same time in a sextile to Juno, right? There's that investment again. This is really about taking a break, right? Now, and it's a siesta, right? And we need to, here's that concept of digestion again. The need to allow the functions of the body and the psyche to digest, free from external pressures. We're really going to be feeling this, and the quincunx to Uranus is that there's always disruption in our material world. How are we going to allow ourselves to digest things without influence from external pressures if it's constantly being pressured? So this is going to, again, require us to adjust ourselves and our expectations. And with Juno in retrograde in Sagittarius and really having us review our contractual obligations to this cultural paradigm, we can really invest this recuperation moment, this siesta moment, this 0 point moment. We can invest this into an ability to really, Juno is very connected to Libra in the sense that it's about balance and contractual obligations and fairness. And so we can apply this need for recuperation, this siesta type of energy that we're all going to be feeling internally into this review period, so that we can really take in and assimilate everything that we have accumulated thus far and let it just be, right? If we find that singular, that 0 point, that balance point in our transfiguration process that Libra ultimately represents, I think we're going to have a better idea of ultimately, when it comes to reviewing our contractual obligations to this collective paradigm. It's just that Uranus is consistently providing external pressure in the material world by disrupting it constantly, even when it's at this position of like recharge through the natural world and to be revitalized by the natural world. That's great. And that may be how we adjust ourselves, is that our minds are also able to find that revitalization. But we can't do one or the other. Like, this is where the quincunx comes in, right? We have to adjust ourselves and our expectations at this moment. So as it moves past this point, it's going to trine Mercury. And there's the rest of that trine. Mercury retrograde that is slowing down, at least slowing down to where it's going to station direct. It's in the degree that it's going to station direct right now. And so here's the rest of this trine, this grand trine that it is also with Saturn. And oh boy, again, this is a really good moment here, because it requires no participation from us whatsoever for these things to come together, which is the capacity to gain an objective and calm understanding of all of the experiences we were once very deeply involved in. When we sit in that, it is very supported by where Mercury is, that is in a position of mental metamorphosis, mental maturity. Again, there's a lot here about like finding that still point, and there's a lot here with this moon in Libra that's allowing us to seamlessly move things around in order to find that balance point. And being able to gain an objective and calm understanding of all of our experiences is absolutely in total alignment in this trine, this moon trine Mercury. So our emotions are really going to come through the vessel of Mercury, definitely retrograde, so it's still kind of an internalized process, but this is really going to be these things will be inseparable from each other in some ways. They're really supporting each other, this mental maturity and this mental metamorphosis that Mercury retrograde is representing right now. The moon's going to come around and square Venus. Now, this is where it starts getting interesting because Venus is in Cancer. And so we do have this very significant grand square that's going to be, well, it's not coming yet. So, but we'll get there. We'll get there. So this square to Venus in Cancer, right, that has been making this our relationships very familial, right? We're pulling towards us that which stabilizes us. We're pulling towards us that which allows us to feel safe and secure. Our five senses, right? Our senses are allowing us to connect to the place where we feel stabilized. And giving a lot of value to this, a lot of value, right? This is what Venus, stands for. But in this, when the moon's in Libra, she's going to square Venus, and she's really, again, she's waiting for her ship to come in some ways, right? She's kind of allowing the space within her to receive something, whereas the moon, again, it's cardinal. Both of these energies are cardinal water, cardinal air, so there's momentum and direction. But the moon is wanting to, give something, right, to those who are thirsting for renewal. We're going to start feeling a sense of responsibility, feeling like we want to apply our own emotional knowledge, our intuitive knowledge in order to help people and help those that we consider that are really thirsty for something. And Venus, is really giving a lot of value to, again, just the weight to being open, receptive. Remember what I said, a bowl is most useful when it's empty. You can't fill it with anything do the magic without the space. And this part and Venus in this degree of Cancer is really holding this space right now. And this square is going to have us adjust ourselves, or we're going to just change, right? What it means to be concerned for people who are thirsty. What does that mean, right? I think a lot of us are trying, and this goes back to the nodes and that connection with the moon, with her nodal axis, of the problems of this transmission. We've accumulated so much. How are we going to then give over to those who are thirsty for it, right? How are we going to show the concern for others in this situation? Remember, this is a transient moment, and this square here, again, we're going to have to change our expectations. And really, where is the priority here? And Venus is about what we value, whereas the moon is how we feel. And so we're going to have to take some time because not everybody is going to want to drink the water that we provide for them, right? And you can really see that has been the case for a while, but now it's right here in our very daily palpable lives with Venus. So after that, the moon comes around and has a quincunx to Neptune in Pisces, just like we had a quincunx with Jupiter in Pisces at the beginning of this Libra moon transit. So again, this adjustment with, and this is in conjunction with Arcturus. I knew Arcturus was going to come back. Okay. This degree is in conjunction with Arcturus, where the moon is. And so this is about the ability to develop new modes of response to basic life situations. Well, for as much as we are feeling that, we're having a direct connection to Arcturus in this moment, we will have to adjust ourselves because Neptune, being that it is in its fullest power in Pisces, is just dissolving everything except for this very centralized concept of our Dharma, right? So we have to live with that, right? That is part of the Pisces archetype, is that it is everything, and there's no getting away from the stream of consciousness, the ocean of all there is that we manifest from, right? The field, the vibratory field, and the field of potential in quantum physics. So again, we're going to have to adjust ourselves, but this is going to be really strong because it's in conjunction with Arcturus. So we're going to get these like downloads, these emotional connections and downloads to the Arcturians at this moment, the ability to develop for inner strengthening new modes of response, right? It's developing a third wing. It's like a tripod that has a stabilizing point. And it will, again, require us to adjust ourselves, and maybe not so much adjust ourselves in a way that we think. Maybe our dharma and the way that we have been conceptualizing it, because Neptune is creating this nebulous, cloudy, foggy reality, maybe this in fact is going to sharpen that, right? We will adjust ourselves based on the developing of this third potential, this stabilizing force that's coming from Arcturus and the wisdom of Arcturus. It will allow us to adjust ourselves when maybe we have been really unsure and confused about what we're here to do, right? This is kind of an amazing moment here for as much as the quincunx requires, because these things don't seem to fit together, right? That's what the quincunx represents. But it also is kind of this wild card that, you know, something comes up and we have to adjust ourselves. So these are all really important things to be happening as we move into the solstice. Not only that, the sun is in conjunction with Betelgeuse and Polaris, so pointing the way, being our navigator in some ways at this point. So we're going to move into the day of the solstice, which is the 20th. We'll actually look at, here's that trine, look at that, and it's an out of sign trine, right? Because the sun is not quite in Cancer yet, but you see that the Scorpio moon is in a trine to the Jupiter in Pisces. Technically still not in its retrograde phase yet. It is going to enter, it's already stationed, so it's slowing down, and then through the course of this day is going to station retrograde. So technically when the moon in Scorpio is trine here, it's still direct, okay? And this, so let's go back a little bit, because there's going to be a moon squaring Pluto retrograde, Libra moon squaring Pluto retrograde, right? Our ability to fly high in the sky versus the path up the mountain goat treading up the very narrow path, and then Pluto being like, there's no path, right? I'm going to go back and make sure there's really no path up this mountain. We have to make up a totally new route to get to this ascension point. And the moon in Libra is like, I am able to just transcend all of this. So you can feel where there's going to be a square here, because Libra as an air sign is about the transcendence of the mind, right? And we have to deal with definitive, palpable reality in Capricorn and how it impacts everybody, and it's just not ourselves. And with Pluto retrograde here, this is going to, we might crash into the mountain in this square. But again, the discomfort is where we change ourselves. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have this view from the big expansiveness. We already talked about that, how important it is. It's just going to be a very clear barrier in some ways, right? Like, we're going to feel the tension in terms of how we feel emotionally and our ability to transcend all of this in our mind, and the very stark reality of Pluto and Capricorn. So this is happening on the evening of the 19th into early morning, of course, of the 20th, and the moon will then trine. It's going to trine the sun at the very last degrees of Libra and of Gemini. And this is, where did you go? Let's talk about this here. This is a moment here where the fulfillment of the power of our understanding is very much, and how we feel about that is very much supported by the expression of all of the options placed in front of us, right? This is really important. For as much as this square to Pluto is going to be really uncomfortable in terms of bringing us back down to reality, we still are going to feel the fulfillment of our power of understanding when in relationship to our creative expression, which is really finding itself through all of the potential laid out before us where we make a decision. That last degree of Gemini is all the best and brightest set up in front of us, and then we make our decision when the sun comes into 0 degrees Cancer. So this moment here is really allowing our emotional capacity for really understanding, like not the accumulation of knowledge, but really understanding from a philosophical and a deep wisdom level. We can it's going to find a lot of traction with where we will be right before the solstice, right? Seeing what's in front of us and making a decision. We are going to understand things very, very deeply within ourselves emotionally in order to support this moment of acknowledging the best and brightest options in front of us, right? And from there, the moon moves into Scorpio, and then is starting to station into it's starting to station, right? It's starting to slow down. It's not quite retrograde yet, but it's starting to slow down. So the moon in a trine here to all of this, this grand trine. The sun hasn't quite left Gemini yet, but the moon and Jupiter are making a direct connection to each other, and that, you know, this trine to the sun and Jupiter is going to be exact in a couple days as well. So what is this trine all about? Well, it really symbolizes that within us we feel the feeling of community, basically. Like what is the potential for us when we cooperate with each other, right? We can do anything, and we all come together and do it. And this connection to Jupiter in Pisces, again, we're going to be able to not only enlist each other's cooperation, we're going to have access to, fragments or fossils or something that is going to show us where we've been before and how we have been successful in the past in this feeling of community, right? So we're going to feel it within us, and it's also going to get a lot of structural support with Jupiter expanding in Pisces, okay? And from here, the moon then comes to us from here. So this is beautiful. And then the moon comes to square Mars. And then this is where the ambition and the confrontation really starts to make itself known, because there's a lot of ambition and a real drive to find new value systems when we are working in Scorpio land, because it's this urge to it's an urge, right? It's an urge to find union with other. And it's really strong, like a gold rush, you know? It's like you're getting pulled away from where you're comfortable and your native soil, Cancer. And it's passionate for new values, and which promises something more, right? We don't come into relationship with other, we come into relationship with other, whatever it is, in cooperation and communion, because there's something more that's created when we come together, and we will passionately search for it. We will be pulled away from our own comfort zone in order to go look for it. And this is the descent, right, into the underworld. The square to Mars at this point, though, in Leo is we have to deal with the butting of heads of social values. Like, this is inevitable, right? When this comes along, we are going to have to lean into how uncomfortable this feels, because while we feel how important it is to really start searching for these new values, to let go of where we've been stabilized, as the sun is about to come into 0 degrees Cancer, the Mars in Leo is really going to make this standoff very, very strong. And we are going to have to just lean into this and be uncomfortable, because we're going to learn a lot about ourselves in that moment. Because right from here is when the sun comes into, after this is when the sun comes into 0 degrees Cancer. And so here's our solstice, right? Right before the 21st, we're looking at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the evening of the 20th, we come into 0 degrees Cancer. We raise a new flag. It's a radical reorientation of where we are aligned, where we feel we belong, and it's the second act of the sun, where we are stabilized now. This is where we're going to be growing from, whatever, how, depending on where you find this in your chart. And of course, with a moon in Scorpio, we are emotionally descending into the underworld at the very same time. So not only have we stabilized ourselves, but we are allowing ourselves to sink way deeper into the hidden realms in order to understand ourselves better. Oh man. Oh my. So that's really, a lot of the reading for the astrology. So, as we move through, Black Moon Lilith is coming up to meet Mercury at this point. She's now she'll be in her retrograde at this point, meeting Mercury in Gemini. And, as we move through this week leading up to the full moon, like a full moon in Capricorn, right? Where we're going to really see what we have to let go of in order to cooperate together. In order to get somewhere new, we're going to have to let go of this back and forth because it's inevitable in terms of where we stabilize ourselves. Venus is going to trine Neptune in Cancer. So again, there's going to be some real value placed on, again, this centralization and this interdependence within ourselves that's allowing us to really get in touch with our Dharma. Mercury is going to station direct. This is Monday, the 21st, okay? Mercury is going to station direct. Venus, as you see, is in a trine to Neptune. That means there'll be a grand water trine with a Scorpio moon in just a couple of hours on the 21st. Wow. And this is really about how do we apply that peak experience to our everyday lives. We're going to be really feeling that challenge within us, and it's all through our emotions and our feeling and our emotional landscape. The power of our feeling is so incredible. And it's really going to be about how we can consolidate our energy, how we can stay focused on our Dharma. And when we are challenged within ourselves to take that peak experience of knowing and applying it to our everyday life, this is going to be incredible. But remember, it's a water trine. It's all about our emotions at this point. And the solstice really does signal that it's the beginning of the yin time of year, right? We acknowledge everything that the sun has given to us, light and heat and information, right? The codes that come through this solar energy, and we value it and at the solstice. And then we recognize that reaches its peak and it's now time to start contracting. This is really what the solstice represents. It is much more of a feminine quality, while at the same time acknowledging both aspects of masculine and feminine. So Tuesday, we move into, the moon in Sagittarius as well. And then Wednesday, the 23rd, we're getting pretty close here to this full moon. Wednesday, the 23rd, the sun is going to trine Jupiter, now retrograde, right? Now Jupiter is starting to expand internally on these spaces of this, within us, right? We're going to be like, okay, so what fragments within us can we connect to that shows where we've been? Past lives, multidimensional experiences. It's been outside of us, and now I feel like it's really going to start expanding within. And this is what we need with the sun here, is going to give us the will. It's going to test our will, right? But we can really express ourselves through this place in the trine to Jupiter. This is where it's going to start really we are going to start really being tested in terms of where we're stabilized and making a decision about something. Because once we get to this degree of Cancer, this is where we kind of want to turn around and run away, right? But we have to just push on. And we will get, Jupiter is a benefactor and an advocate. We're going to get some level of fortune or good luck or, benefic energy internally, expanding within us to show us where we've been. We've already done this. This was part of yesterday's reading with the camel, right? We have all the resources that we need. And this trine, Sun and Jupiter, is going to be really instrumental in this, because at the very same time, Venus is going to come into its opposition to Pluto. So you can see this right here. Pluto retrograde. This is where Mars was not that long ago, right? The violent storm that moves through the canyon. So now Venus is pulling in, right? She's pulling towards her and consolidating everything in order to protect that which is valuable to her, in the opposition to which Pluto is just destroying everything that we base our entire reality on. So we're going to really need this trine to Jupiter, because it's going to give us the insight within us that we've already gone through this and we can do it. We can, in fact, have our character and our will tested and move forward, because it's going to be very disruptive, of course. And the moon at the same time is coming into an opposition with Mercury retrograde, or Mercury direct as well. And so that's going to factor into all of it. And then we have our full moon on the 24th, 4 degrees Cancer, 4 degrees Capricorn. And again, this back and forth, right? The self-justification for the decision we've made is going to be rolling around in the way we express ourselves and identify ourselves as back and forth, and a cat arguing with a mouse about what is meant to happen. Whereas the moon in Capricorn at this moment is going to be fully illuminated to show us what we need to do, how we each can fully, cooperate in order to get somewhere, right? We're outfitting a canoe going somewhere together. And that requires cooperation. It requires all of us coming together under a common goal. And we will see how this back and forth, which is a natural part of the process, how this back and forth, we're going to see very, very brightly, right? It's going to be brightly illuminated what we need to get rid of, and what is it that is really allowing us to capitalize on this back and forth, right? What was the new moon? It was the eclipse, the assimilation process. And so now we get to a point where not only are we assimilating, but we have to also recognize what we have to flush out of our system if we actually want to accomplish anything together. And that's going to be very strongly shown to us. So let's just go into the reading real quick, since I did it, and it's quite interesting to see what came up for the solstice in terms of the intuitive message. So, and then we will move on with our day, shall we? All right, friends. So I'm going to move myself up here. I'm going to check in with the stream just real quick and make sure that everything is good to go. Okay. Since I haven't checked in at all. All right, here is our reading. We have the High Priestess in the center here, reversed. We have the moon as our outcome, okay? This is pretty clear that we are, and the Prince of Swords, right? Well, this is pretty clear that we've gone from a place where our ego is just kind of like, all of the thought processes are just like, our ego is pulling our own chariot, and it's pretty erratic and all over the place. And it's not to say that there's nothing to be said for pure mental energy, and we have been in pure mental energy. There's no doubt about that. The Prince of Swords, I mean, if you look at it, little versions of the prince pulling the chariot, and he's just kind of like, he's like in this contorted position, right? But there's also a lot of balance within here, right? You see that there is a cube and then a pyramid as well. And so there is balance, and they have those too. So there is something to be said for all of this mental activity. The chariot of the winds, right? Pure manifestation of the mind or the intellect, intellectual agility. These are the Orion star seeds, right? They're coming out and being present right now, and creativity. So this is the causal energy coming into the moment of the solstice. And as much as this has been great, it's time now. We're going to move to a place where we completely go from the Gemini mental, strictly, purely mental energy that we are embodying to this priestess moment, which is the center of this solstice. And in fact is reversal, the moon in Scorpio, right? We're going to have a moon in Scorpio during this solstice time. And so when we look at the High Priestess, we know that she represents the unconscious, the subconscious, in the House of Mysteries, right? She represents the deep mysteries, right? Going into that space. The sacred feminine, the High Priestess, the moon herself. And when she is reversed at the heart of this this solstice here. Remember, Cancer is the home territory of the moon, and this is where the sun is entering into. And so in some ways, this aspect is getting flipped on its head. Now, there's a couple different ways to look at this. Number one, when the priestess is reversed, we're ignoring reality, we're having doubts, we're having resistance, we're having fear, right? This black moon Lilith energy where it's about self-preservation and a real strong connection to the depth of the feminine itself, but it's not consciously, we're not made consciously aware of it. And in fact, we can't wrap our minds around this place. And deeper knowledge, a feeling of darkness when it's reversed. So the hermit and the priestess are connected, right? Because the priestess is the space within that the hermit accesses as a result of its introversion. And this is, in fact, the energy that is brought forward as a result of the introversion and the coming back, away from the public life, for instance. So, but the fact that it's reversed here, this is a very stark, it's not only the moon, it's not only that we come into Cancer time, the sun comes into Cancer, we have the Scorpio moon at the same time. So I feel like that too, because it's been so heady and it's been so air oriented, especially with the moon in Libra right now and all this Gemini, Mercury in Gemini retrograde right now, it's been a lot of just this cycle of mental energy that's just been kind of pulling us all over the place, and then bam, right here into the priestess, like it's just going to hit like a ton of bricks. And the fact that it's reversed, one second, I gotta plug this in. The fact that it's reversed really suggests that it's going to be very drastic. Well, the moon is going to be in Scorpio, so it's going to be even deeper than we maybe have anticipated. But at the same time, this does allow us to get into this space almost directly. It's just going to be very obvious because Jupiter is going to go retrograde at this point too. So we have the Scorpio moon, Jupiter that stations retrograde in Pisces, and then we have the solstice itself. And so it's just going to be bam. Now, what we have at the root here is a loss of power, right? Queen of Keys, we are looking at another feminine energy, right? We're going from this masculine energy to the feminine, right? That is the solstice point, is the shifting of the seasons and the shifting from the masculine yang half, especially the summer, yang half to the yin half, right? And so it's very drastic, I feel like. And where we are energetically rooted, likely for this, is a lot of feeling disempowered on a material level. And we talked about this with the moon in a quincunx to Uranus, right? That the material world being upended consistently by Uranus, and the moon having us find that still point in our minds and in the application of our wisdom and knowledge is going to require us to adjust ourselves. Well, this feels very reminiscent of it. And there's a emotional distancing from a woman or a dispute with a woman in authority. And it is time to consider our aspirations, right? Because we're going to have to really make some decisions about where we are stabilized. And this is an unstable energy, right? And it's in an unstable energy in terms of our own feelings of power and confidence and authority over our material lives, okay? So we are already having this high priestess moment be reversed. We have this Queen of Keys, which represents us really and our feelings of confidence and authority over our material world to pull it towards us, right? Also reversed, right? This is a very disempowering and very disorienting type of connection here. So up above, what we see, two cards came out today. We have the One of Keys, right? Which is the architect, which is becoming the director and creator of our own manifest reality. The architect is the very beginning. So we have to acknowledge this part of ourselves. And it also is, I got to stay focused on time because I have people coming. And let's see here. And along with that, we have the Eight of Scrolls, the paths unknown, right? So we are also going to be acknowledging in our conscious awareness on some level here that it's time that we are the manifestors of our reality, and to acknowledge too that in terms of a mental perspective, it's time to start going down some other paths, and we're going to really have no choice because things are going to be upended for us. So, and we see here that the moon, I know that this is going to be kind of a truncated version here, but I have to go. The moon is our effect, right? Going into this space of the moon, right? Going into the journey into the dark night. This is really going to be what the solstice starts to activate for us. And this is going to be difficult because there's, we're going to have a full moon soon, right? To journey into the dark night, exploring the depths and confronting our dark side. And when we feel disempowered in a material way, this is going to be aggravated so much more. So I want to show the guidance real quick before I have to go. The unicorn, which is just when you're feeling disempowered, and you will, right? Because we have the Six of Forces reversed. So feeling very disempowered and emotionally reactive, and your life is getting turned upside down. Remember that your emotions are what really makes the difference here. And so the unicorn is about what? Indulging your creative, imaginative side. Didn't we talk about this? Bringing in the childlike nature, being willing to be imaginative and artistic and magical and not being so serious, being willing to embody that childlike innocence in order to create, okay? Because it is going to feel like that. And then the mountain goat is also too about just getting ourselves in balance, right? That narrow pathway that is represented by the mountain goat. In terms of, we are aware that it's time to walk down these paths. We do acknowledge that we are the manifester of a reality, but we have to be in balance in order to really go successfully tread this pathway, especially when Pluto is making it really difficult. And on top of that, we have the One of Roses, the commitment to ourselves, right? Commitment to our contracts, commitments to ourselves, connected to our loved ones, committed to why we are here. It's really important that we acknowledge this. So I know that was really rushed at the end, but I got kiddos coming and I got to get ready for that. So I thank you so much for being here. I hope you found this insightful and inspiring and helpful. And I will be back on Monday for the Daily Medicine transmission. Please reach out if you need support. You can book a reading through catalystenergies.net. You can find Catalyst Energies on social media. It's all in the description box below. I love you. Thank you for being here. Have an incredible weekend. Have an incredible solstice. And we'll be checking in again on Monday. Love you guys.